I'm Jody, founder of the travel blog Family Travel Magazine and mom of 2 college students.
I'm Anna, owner of Waves and Wandering LLC, which is a full-service travel agency. I'm also mom to 3 daughters and grandmother to 3 grandchildren. Welcome to our show.
Jody is just back from California and she spent some time in Disneyland. Jody, how was the trip? What'd you do?
It was a great trip. I was at a conference for a few days, so I spent like 3 days inside, which was great because it rained those days. And then the day that
Yuck.
we had at the park, the weather was really nice. You know, that Southern California weather you get where it's got a little chill to it, but it's great for kind of running around the parks.
Yeah.
And that was perfect because I was doing the Gumball Rally, which is something
What
I've
is
never
the
done
Gumball
before.
Rally?
So
I had not heard of it until you mentioned it.
either, and it was part of this conference that I went to that we were able to do it. And it's run through a fan site called Mice Chat, and it's this huge event. There were hundreds of people there, and they're all Disney fans. And you come up with a team of 3 to 4 people, and the teams, they come up with their own names. Some of them had costumes or t-shirts, little things to give out. We were very ill prepared in that way. But you get up really early and you all go into this conference room and they kind of run through. And it's essentially, this year it was like a murder mystery. So it kind of ran like Clue, where we had to figure out the weapon, the victim, the murderer, and the location. And there were 4 booklets. So we went into the park at rope drop. We took a group picture and then we immediately got the booklets, and you could not use your phone. So that was kind of now think about that a little bit and how the parks are. We as influencers
Yeah.
were allowed to use our phones for photos, but we couldn't use the app,
Oh
which
my
means
gosh.
you couldn't see wait times. You couldn't use Lightning
No.
Lane. You couldn't use single rider. You couldn't see show times. And some of the things you had to do were like shows like PhilharMagic or Disney Junior Dance Party. If a ride went down, you couldn't use the app to see if it came back up.
Oh my gosh.
So we literally, I tracked it on my watch. We did 10 miles, and and that's California Adventure, which is not a huge park. And we were
Yeah.
going back and forth. We did use there's like the signboard in the hub we were able to use. But basically what you have to do is go on, it essentially works out to almost every attraction and movie, show, like Turtle Talk with Crush, the Animation
Oh my
Academy where you
gosh.
draw, and all of those things were worth points. And then some of them you had to do things like count the number of dancing turtles during the ride,
Oh my
or
gosh.
what shape were the stripes on, this character in a movie. So,
With no way to coordinate between attractions, like to time yourself out anywhere.
right, because what we got was a quarter of, so like you might potentially have wanted to go, say, to like Radiator Springs Racers in the morning. But if that wasn't in your first book, you didn't know what they wanted there. So you couldn't knock that one out. So
This sounds
yeah,
crazy.
it was a lot of strategy figuring out where, like, what to skip because
Mm-hmm.
timing mattered. So maybe you didn't want to wait like an hour and a half for a ride or something like that. And maybe you had, like, we had one booklet left and a ride had gone down and we thought it might go back up, but was it worth it to hold on to that book? So it was so much fun though. And I think really kind of like a bucket list type of experience for any sort of Disney fan who's done a lot.
Yeah.
It'd be
Do they
hard
do
for
this
someone new.
often?
They
Is
do
this
it
like
once
an
a year.
annual?
It's a once a year thing. Next year is villains themed.
That's cool.
And I'm not sure where it will be. I think this is the first year it was in California Adventure. It's usually in Disneyland, and I think they've had it at Disney World.
It's definitely something to keep an eye out for, though, because it sounds fun. It sounds really challenging, though.
Yeah, it was super fun. But there's a lot of rules, and there were a lot of people like enforcing the rules. So,
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't just like go into a movie, see like what it was you needed to see, and then run out in the middle of it, right? You had to like
Yeah.
see these things through.
Oh my gosh.
It was so much
It
fun
sounds
though.
fun. Yeah, it sounds fun.
It was a lot of fun. But I'll tell you, I was really tired when I was done.
I mean, 10 miles, especially if it's like 10 chaotic miles, like you have to retrace
Right,
your steps back and forth. Like there's no
right,
forward progression. So, yeah, that could be
right.
exhausting.
And Lunar New Year, which we had talked about in a prior episode, that was going on. So we had wanted to kind of experience that too. And so
Yeah.
we, basically decided to maybe not go crazy on the race and like kick back a little bit and kind of grab some lunch and enjoy that.
And still did 10 miles. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. There are a whole bunch of different cruise lines out there, and we've talked a lot about cruising. Disney's known for being family friendly. There's Virgin Voyages, which is adult only. Silver Sea is also like an older demographic and luxurious. Um, Today we're going to talk a little bit about Princess, and I'm excited to talk about this because I haven't actually been on a Princess cruise, but I know Anna just came back from one not that long ago. So we're going to talk about Princess cruises, demographics, kind of what you'll do there, itineraries, and all that stuff. So I'm super eager to hear kind of your take on this because I know you've done a lot of different cruise lines.
I'm super excited to talk about Princess.
So right off the bat, what do you want us to know about Princess cruises?
The first thing I think people conjure up in their minds when they think about Princess is that it's definitely an old cruise, an old cruise line. Everything is done so traditionally. And I think that especially with the newest ship, Sun Princess, they are really working to come out of that vibe. They're coming out of, we're only an old person's cruise. We don't have anything for children. And I really think, even though the reputation is probably warranted to an extent, it's warranted mostly because of the itineraries. Princess does a lot of longer itineraries. They do a lot of more exotic itineraries. But on board, they're really stepping up their game when it comes to families and children. The kids clubs, when we did our very first Princess cruise, the kids club was my daughter and maybe two other kids sitting at a table in the main dining room doing like coloring sheets and stuff. There just weren't kids activities. But now they have full-blown kids spaces. They have kid activities. They have stuff that you can do with your whole family. So I think they're taking it much more seriously when it comes to drawing in multi-generational families, younger cruisers that have kids.
So are these kind of the types of things that they've done to really appeal to like a broader audience?
Absolutely. I'll just admit it. They're not going to compete with Disney when it comes to kids clubs and kids activities. But the spaces now, so Princess has Camp Discovery, and it's for kids that are from 3 to 17. They have, in the younger kids area, they have an outdoor space. Like when you go to the kids club, it's not just the inside kids club. There's an actual outdoor space. So your kids, it's still enclosed, it's still secure. So your kids aren't wandering off the ship by themselves. But it's a whole little play area with like jungle gyms and stuff that you might find at a playground inside the kids club. They have tricycles that the little kids can ride. They have all kinds of gaming consoles for the older kids. The oldest of the kids, like the teenagers, they have dance competitions, hip hop dance lessons. They have all sorts of activities geared towards kids of all ages. And the best thing about it is if you're traveling with teenagers, you know those kids don't want to be with you. They want to do their own thing. They want to be with other kids. They can hang out at the teens club until 1 o'clock in the morning. So mom and dad can go to the show, go see a comedian, do a little gambling, have a late night snack, and know that the kids are in some kind of an organized activity until super late.
That's great. I think, I think with kids, when you're traveling with kids, you really, you want there to be activities for them to do. And I know my kids always liked kind of meeting other kids on the cruise. So,
Yeah, my kids did too.
They don't necessarily want to hang out with you all the time. And it gives you a lot more opportunity to kind of explore those adult only areas of the ship, which we had discussed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. And it's nice to have those areas and it's nice to be able to go, but it's also nice that especially with Sun Princess, there's a lot of functional space for the whole family. There are splash zones, which Princess has not had previously. There's open air observation decks where you can go up and do some stargazing and stuff like that. There are all kinds of outdoor activities. And I did not know this until recently. Princess does movies under the stars, which a lot of cruise lines do. Princess is actually the cruise line that started movies under the stars. And I noticed on our Sun Princess voyage, they really did have movies that appealed across the board. It wasn't just like Disney animated features. It wasn't just, stuff that you don't want little kids to see. They were really family friendly movies.
That's great. So, what's the general like atmosphere on board? Is it stuffy? Is it casual? What are you going to feel uncomfortable? Because I know traditionally, like cruising, you think like 90s style cruising, like very formal. What's Princess like regards to that?
They do still have formal nights on Princess, but I think across the industry as a whole, for most cruise ships, I'm not talking about, Silver Sea or like a high end luxury cruise, but really across the board, formal doesn't mean what it used to mean.
Right,
Again,
right.
our first Princess cruise, we had tuxedos, we had evening gowns, we really were decked out. I saw, I actually, I don't think I saw any tuxedos on our most recent Princess cruise. There were a couple of women in formal gowns, but even formal nights now, it's more of a cocktail dress.
Right.
I saw men that didn't even have ties on. They had collared shirts and maybe a jacket. So it's definitely less of a stuffy, real formal vibe. There's still enrichment programs. There are still, I think, spaces where you feel like you have to be a little more dressed up, like formal night in the main dining room. But we did, Sun Princess has an experience called Spellbound. And Spellbound is a whole evening where you go to this very exclusive dinner. It's all very secretive. And then they take you to this secret area, and it's a magic show and cocktails, and it's a whole big thing. And the invitation that you get in your stateroom says that you have to be fancy. Like it pretty much says to you, they want you in cocktail dresses and nice outfits. We still, even at Spellbound, a lot of the guys were just in khakis with maybe a jacket and a golf shirt. The women had on dressy slacks and a blouse, or they had cocktail dresses. No one going to Spellbound where they very specifically were like, we want you to dress your best. No one was in a formal gown or a tuxedo.
People just generally don't want to travel with that stuff anyway.
They don't. Who wants to? I mean, you're on vacation. I don't want to
Right.
wear Spanx. I don't want to pack a bunch of stuff like shoes to match every
Right.
outfit and jewelry. I just don't want to pack all of that stuff.
Right. Especially if you're flying, carrying a dress like that is kind of inconvenient.
Yeah, and a full suit, like especially if you have to go multiple formal nights, you don't want to have to pack 2 and 3 suits because they're heavy and you have a 50-pound weight limit. You can't, you just do it.
Right. Right. Now, you mentioned the kids' clubs and some of the kids' activities. Are there generally a lot of kids on Princess?
There are not. We have our most recent Princess cruises were definitely not during kid-friendly times. I think Alaska is definitely more kid-friendly. It's the summertime. You're going to find more families that are traveling, but there were not a ton of kids on our last couple of Princess cruises. They're trying to change that. And again, I think the big obstacle is Princess tends to do longer cruises. They don't have a lot of 3 and 4 night cruises. But once you're on board, if you're a homeschooler or if your school has, like I know some schools have like a fall break. Our kids never had, but they have like a week off in October. I think it's a perfect cruise. They have dance lessons, game shows. There was an 80s dance party. They have almost on Sun Princess, a Cirque du Soleil kind of an act that you can go see. So the entertainment is so varied and appeals to such a broad audience. And with dinners and stuff, you don't have to go sit in the dining room. There's an Irish pub, there's a pizza place. You can make other arrangements so that if you don't want to put on pants, I'm just saying that. If you don't want to put on pants and you're a guy, you don't want to do the khakis, leave your shorts on, go to the pizza place and enjoy a meal way more casual.
Yeah, I think with any of these cruise lines, other than probably Disney, when you go is going to be a big kind of difference in terms of what you see in terms of kids because people with little kids who aren't in school are not necessarily cruising.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think when you have to make a commitment that's at least a week long,
Yeah.
it's harder to do while the kids are in
Right.
school.
Right.
Some
Definitely.
of the cruises, Princess does a lot of European cruises. They do a lot of, well, I mean, they do a ton of Alaska cruises, but when you have a family, like my daughter just did this. My daughter has 3 little kids. They didn't have passports because they haven't needed them so far, but they're doing Princess in a couple of months and everybody needed passports. Well, they're a family of 5. So passports is a big financial commitment.
Right.
And if you tend to have, if you have little kids, you don't tend to want to put out a couple of $100 for a passport that's only going to be good for 5 years
Right. It's
if you
tough
can
too
just wait
because
until they get older.
it's tough because you have to bring both parents. So I know that was always a deterrent for us because, like we both had to take time out of work and it can be tough.
Yeah, and that's exactly what she had to do. They both had to take an afternoon off from work to go to the appointment and, wrangle the kids because there were three of them. And I think Princess hasn't yet gotten into like the water slides or the roller coasters or, the stuff on board that you might see on a royal cruise or a Disney cruise. But just the fact that they're sort of coming into more activities in a kids club and more dedicated space for kids, I think it really shows a commitment to, in the future, enticing more families to sail.
Yeah, and I think that's the direction the industry's going anyway, is that more and more families are sailing.
For sure.
So we've talked about a lot of really great benefits to Princess, which is all kind of new information to me. Are there any downsides?
For sure. And I think the length of the cruises is a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, especially during the school year. You can't just take your kid out for a week. And then when you tack on, you've got to get there a day early. And if you
Right.
have a flight delay coming back, it could be an 8 or a 9 day vacation. So I think one of the big limitations to Princess is they don't do the weekend cruises. And even if you don't have kids, you don't necessarily want to take a full week off of work. You want to do the weekend booze cruise or like the Utopia big weekend thing that they have going. So you just maybe take a Friday or a Monday off and you still have all your vacation days. So I think that's definitely a downside. I also think because there aren't as many kids on a Princess cruise, even though you have the kids clubs and they have way more activities, there aren't the number of kids that you're going to find on a Disney cruise or Carnival or Royal, where you go to the kids club and there might be 30 kids for you to play with. There might be 10. So I think that makes parents hesitate, but I would recommend Princess to just about anybody at this stage. And I think the more word gets out there that they are attracting a younger crowd, the better it'll be. They may add more 3 and 4 night itineraries. Most of their 3 and 4 night itineraries are West Coast itineraries. So I think the more they appeal to families, the more they'll start to consider that kind of a sailing.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else you want to add, or I think this was really helpful for anyone who just didn't know a whole lot about Princess and was maybe considering it.
Yeah, I think it's a cruise that everybody should try. I think if you can do a shorter sailing, like a 4 night, maybe West Coast cruise, just so you get a vibe for it or a feel for what Princess is all about, it's definitely a cruise line worth considering. And now we have to get you on a Princess cruise.
Definitely.
Mail call, question stories, let's hear it all. From you to us, it's wonder and chat. So grab a seat, let's talk just like that.
We got quite a few questions about Disney. Disney is such a hot topic, especially when it comes to crowded times, crowding issues. So Jody, what is your favorite time to go? And are there crowds during that time?
So that is such a loaded question because I could give you 5 answers. And I think a lot of it has to do with your situation. And so obviously the holidays, the decorations are amazing. You should definitely do that.
Yeah.
Halloween, and I mean Halloween now, what they're starting in like August, right? So that's a great time. Super fun. Love that party. If you're asking in terms of just like you're going on a family vacation, what we used to do before the kids went to school was the first week of May. And that was my favorite time because you're past spring break,
Mm-hmm.
college and high school, and you are before summer. So it's a nice kind of, it is still hot, right? It's hot in Florida a lot,
Yeah.
but it's not quite the summer yet. May, early May, that was my kind of the kids, the kids aren't in school. That was our ideal time. But I think you should visit those other times I mentioned too, as well as food and wine, any festival you want to experience. But yeah, May is my favorite.
And I think, like you talked about on the Disney episode, there's not really a good way to narrow down when is not a crowded time. It just
Right.
seems busy all the time.
Right, right.
Do you think it's worth booking the VIP guides? Now, I know they're super, super expensive, and now they have the Premier Pass for Lightning Lane. Are those tools that you would recommend?
So it's hard to recommend something that expensive, right? And I mean, I personally have not done a VIP guide or the Premier Pass, so it's hard to recommend them. Like a lot of things, if you have the money, you have the discretionary income, this can be an amazing way to see the parks.
Yeah.
When I was in Disneyland, I mentioned that we were there for Lunar New Year, and those booths, we were there on a Saturday, so it was very busy. But you know how those booths get really, they get busy.
Yep.
And we saw a VIP guide, she was getting the food for the family. You know, amazing luxury, not affordable for everybody.
No, it's not. And VIP guides right now, depending on when you go, and obviously the more crowded it is, the more expensive they are. It's $450 to $900 for 1 hour, and you have to book them for a minimum of 7 hours. So it's a commitment. It's a financial commitment.
Huge commitment. So yeah, I think, you know, we could debate value for money, but it is an amazing luxury. And, you know, I'm always kind of envious when I see one in the parks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because they do, and the guides, like you said, going to get food, they really are super helpful because you could be on an attraction and they're running off and doing something else to
Right.
make the flow of your day just easy peasy. So we just talked about this. There used to be a rumor that you could hire someone with an annual pass, specifically someone that was disabled and maybe entitled to the DAS, and that could help you get through the parks faster. Do people still do that?
You should not do that. No, that is,
You should not.
that is
It's not allowed. For anybody that's wondering if they can make a career out of this, it very specifically says on your annual pass that you cannot use it to make money. For people that used to take advantage of their status with the Disney Disability Access Services pass, that's why we don't have the privileges we used to have, because they just blew it for everybody.
So while we talk about Disney, one of the things that comes up a lot is the DAS, which is, I'm not even sure exactly what it stands for. It's a card that you can use to get kind of fewer waits in the parks if you are eligible. But could you tell us a little bit about it?
I can. And I think the reason this makes our news section is because this is something that is consistently a bone of contention with disabled guests that are traveling to Disney World. So DAS stands for Disability Access Services. And there was a time that the DAS card or the DAS pass was almost a front of the line pass. If you were a disabled person, and by disabled, it was pretty much anything, because Disney didn't ask any questions. You could just go to the park, tell them that you were disabled, get your disability access services card, and you could just go to the front of the line of virtually any attraction, and they would let you in as soon as they possibly could. So if it was a show, they would let you in first. If it was a ride that had an hour wait, you were at the front of the line and they moved you in. Some of the problems that started happening with disability access services is, like we just alluded to, there were people that had disabilities that could access these DAS cards or passes, and they also had an annual pass. So they were doing a little side hustle where they would advertise their services, that they would take your family into the park, use their DAS card, and get you to the front of the line on all of the attractions. So they were using their annual pass and their disability to make money. And there were people that were taking advantage, because who wants to wait an hour in line for Splash Mountain or for whatever? So Disney completely revamped the services not that long ago. And it is a constant source of frustration, especially for people who have always been able to access this card. So now the wording to be eligible for the DAS is that it is intended to accommodate guests who, due to a developmental disability like autism, are unable to wait in a conventional queue for an extended period of time. Essentially, what that means is if you have, let's say, a mobility issue, they want you to use a wheelchair. They want you to use whatever other accommodation you can. You can fit your wheelchair, you can fit your scooter through the line. So they want you to get in line with everybody else. If you have another physical condition that can be accommodated in another way, they encourage you to accommodate those conditions in another way. So DAS now is really for people who are maybe on some neurodivergent scale where they don't really fully comprehend having to wait in line.
Mm-hmm.
Are there exceptions to that? There probably are, but it's not easy to get a handle on what qualifies you now for the Disability Access Services card. It's easier to get a handle on the things that don't make you eligible.
Right. So is this something that the whole family could use?
Essentially it is, but it's limited to 4 people. So if you have a family of 4 and the 4 people includes the disabled person, you're perfectly fine. But if you're traveling with a bigger family, you have 5 or 6 people, or you have grandparents or aunts and uncles, it's still limited to just 4 people. So you will have to go to the attraction at a different time. But here's where the DAS is different now. Instead of it being a front of the line pass, let's say you go over to Space Mountain and it's an hour-long wait. Your friends and family can get into the line. And when you go to get your DAS, the DAS should give you a return time approximately the same amount of time as the wait. So essentially, if you have somebody that just can't wait in line, somebody that's on the autism spectrum or whatever, and they just can't stay in the line, you can leave, go do something else for that hour so that person isn't stuck standing in line. The rest of your family can wait in the line. And by the time you come back, you may not be exactly at the same point, but you're similarly in the same point, and you can ride the ride. Yeah, sort it together. The other thing about the DAS is you're not specifically limited. Like, let's say you have a return time for Space Mountain at 1 p.m. If for some reason you can't make it back at 1 p.m., you can go later. You don't have to actually be there on the dot at 1 o'clock.
Right.
Yeah, it is. It's super, super helpful. And I know it's super contentious right now because a lot of people used to be able to get disability access services from Walt Disney World, and they're just trying now to make it so that whatever the park hasn't already accommodated can be accommodated with the DAS.
Great. Well, thank you for all of that information. That's really helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. Next time, join us where we're talking all about summer rentals. So whether it's the shore or the beach, whatever you call it.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Wander and Chat. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And hey, if you're in the mood to make our day, leave a review or comment, or, send us a postcard. We'll take what we can get. Stay connected, and we'll see you next time. Safe travels, happy wandering, and remember, no matter where you go, there you are. And that's a wrap on another adventure.